Thank you, Rick, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for being present this morning. I want to bring to your attention some things that you should already be aware of related to gun violence over a 72-hour window where our most vulnerable in our community were shot. In one hand being two young children, ages 11 and 9, and the other being a 62-year-old senior elder in our community. Like many of you, this past Sunday, on Mother's Day, I was actually with my mom, and I received a call that a 11-year-old boy, along with his father, had been shot. And I would say pretty much the remaining of the day, I was hoping, praying for the best, that this little boy will pull through. And the good news is he will. Then the night, as Mother's Day continued, I received a second call that another child on Mother's Day, while with her mother in a vehicle, had been shot. And she was not alone in that vehicle with her mother. Her 8-year-old sibling as well as her 1-year-old sibling were also in that car. And the same thing, hoping, wishing, praying that this 9-year-old little girl, by the way, her name is London, 11-year-old little boy, his name is Mason. But thinking and hoping, wishing, praying that two innocent children should have been shot in the first place, but they would actually recover, be in a position to survive from being shot. And that is the case today. Then yesterday, while actually in a meeting with high school seniors that are graduating next week, and literally the conversation turned to gun violence in the community in and around the city of Birmingham. While having this conversation, I received a text actually, and then a call that a gentleman was shot and killed. A 62-year-old gentleman by the name of Mr. Coleman, Michael Coleman. I want to talk a little bit more about Michael Coleman. Michael Coleman is a gentleman who has been in this community for quite some time, with his significant other for 38 plus years. I actually spoke with his significant other in person yesterday. Spoke with his brother, they're 2 years apart, spoke with his brother yesterday as well, in person. Mr. Coleman, I apologize. Mr. Coleman had ALS and was wheelchair bound. Very known in his community in the Woodlawn area, literally traveling around in his electric wheelchair, friendly, known to the neighbors. His wife and his brother shared with me that he was recently diagnosed with hospice. But he didn't want to necessarily go in. Under this tree in front of his apartment complex, he found what I would call a reprieve, a place that in nature, outside, under a tree, that he can just enjoy himself. Not just yesterday, but majority of the time when he's under this tree in front of his apartment complex, including yesterday, he was not alone. He was surrounded by a bunch of young men hanging out, posted up, for whatever term you want to use. And they always hang under this tree, and Mr. Coleman always hangs under this tree with them. And I'm going to imagine, while this is still under investigation, that one of those young men under that tree had some issue, some beef, some drama with someone else in some other part of the community, and they decided to bring that drama to that block in the form of doing an actual drive-by. And one of those young men did shoot back, and all those young men scattered. But Mr. Coleman, wheelchair bound, did not have the luxury that those other people under that same exact tree had. They were able to run and duck. He could not, because he was wheelchair bound. Because he was wheelchair bound and not able to take cover or run like these other people under this tree, who were most likely the people in the car were shooting at. He received a bullet and he died. Mr. Coleman, 62 years of age. London, 9 years of age. Mason, 11 years of age. These are our most vulnerable people in our community, our children and our elders. And of all people, it is without fail, we're supposed to, we as in the village, everybody is supposed to do everything to take care of our children and our elders, our seniors. So I want to go back and talk about the situation, what happened after Mr. Coleman was shot. And I can only say so much because this is an active investigation. But it's important for the public to be aware of and know as many facts as we can give. And simply to say that my expectation is that these young men had some type of affinity to Mr. Coleman. Mr. Coleman had some type of affinity to these young men because they were always under this tree. It's an everyday occurrence. Sometimes playing dice, sometimes just hanging out. This is a known area. I visited this area multiple times well prior to yesterday. Police have been called to trespass people because it's literally right in front of a small apartment complex. But my expectation at a minimum would be that if you're always hanging under this tree with Mr. Coleman, and you know he couldn't run, and you know whatever activity you were into could bring such violence, at a minimum render aid. Well, how about this? At a minimum, cooperate with the police. So I want to make that point very clear. That it was too many people outside with Mr. Coleman, that he was not by himself. And that in order for the police to actually be in a position to bring some form of justice to Mr. Coleman's significant other, to his brother, to his children, his grandchildren, and all his neighbors and the community and residents of Woodlawn, that the folk who were with Mr. Coleman know something. And that almost 24 hours later, not once, but twice now, I have reached out to BPD's leadership. And we have witnesses that are refusing to cooperate. Birmingham Police Department cannot solve that case or many other cases of witnesses who know who did it, know what happened, and or saw what happened, refuse to cooperate. I dare say that in the same instance with Miss London and Mason, same thing. There are no secrets in this city or any community like Birmingham, where people know, have facts, have evidence, have information, know who, know what, know when, know how. Know the shooter, know the driver, know the type of car. They have the information. BPD cannot solve these cases in isolation. That on the continuum of the actual judicial process, BPD needs information, BPD needs facts, some form of evidence, some form of a witness to come forward and share information so they can get that to the actual district attorney's office. So we can in return actually get a warrant to make an arrest. So that person charged with that crime can go before a judge to have a hearing to see if there's enough evidence to bind it over to a grand jury, for a grand jury to come down and say there's enough evidence for this person to be in a position to plead guilty or not guilty, and for that to be an actual trial in front of a jury. That is a process. And you cannot, we cannot complete that process or start that process if witnesses who we know have information refuse to cooperate, or who refuse to come forward and share credible information because they were literally out there. So yes, this is a direct plea to the young men who were out there, literally hang with Mr. Coleman every single day under the same tree. You know he couldn't run like you. You know he couldn't move like you. one or more, you shot back. You saw the entire thing. We need you to come forward. We need you to cooperate. We need you to share information so we can bring some form of justice to Mr. Coleman and his family. But there's other things I want to say to the public. And we'll get into, well, what is the police doing? Because that's always the question, right? We look to leadership. We look to the mayor's office. We look to the Birmingham Police Department to say, what are you doing to address crime from an enforcement standpoint? We'll get into it in a second. But I do want to talk about how the village, community members, residents have to step up. And I want to acknowledge that if you are afraid, if you don't want to give your name, if you don't want a police car, detective to come to your home, that you can call 205-254-7777. That is a Crime Stopping number. You don't have to necessarily give your name. There's a whole process we can create for you. Also want to acknowledge if you are in fear or fearful and you're concerned about where you live or retaliation, then let us know so we can create and or assist in the resources that you need to relocate so you can feel safe if that's required in exchange for you testifying. But I also want to talk about people in this community who literally give safe harbor to people who shoot and or kill children and seniors. In 3 instances, people have taken the opportunity to shoot 11-year-old or 9-year-old who survived and shoot and kill a 62-year-old man. There is no one in this community that should be giving them or providing safe harbor. Because at some point they came, you know they're hot, you know the car is hot, you know the gun is hot, but on your conscience and your own heart, you got a child, you got a grandchild, you have a father, you got a grandfather. And if that was your family member, you would be beating down the door of Birmingham Police Department saying, what are you going to do about who killed or who shot my child or granddad? You will be pleading with the community that you know somebody saw something, begging for someone to come forward. So it can't be good enough for you only when it's your own family member that is shot and or killed. That all of our children and all of our seniors and elders deserve the same emotional plea in reaction for someone to step up and step forward and give information and not provide safe harbor for shooters that shoot kids and or seniors. Because it's unacceptable. And your conscience or your heart shouldn't allow you to just live with that. Then I want to speak to another group, which I've already spoken to, but it's worth repeating. The people that are actually on the scene that refuse to cooperate. Let us know what we can do. Again, if we need to give you safe harbor to come forward. So I want to make this note. We created a fund a few years ago in partnership with Crime Stoppers related to when children have been shot. And at a minimum right now, there are $80,000 in this pot. Now I shouldn't have to dangle money in front of you to do the right thing. But I think it's required by any means necessary to get factual information for people to come forward, to encourage you to come forward. That if a reward is needed, I am telling you at a minimum, there's $80,000 in the pot right now for people who have information who have shot children in this city, particularly the last 2. Mason, who's 11, and London, who's 9. The other part I want to tell you is that, you know, as it relates to BPD strategies, just to list some of them off for you. All of you are aware we have ShotSpotter. And what ShotSpotter does is after we receive the call or the activation, part of the strategy for us is to track the most active locations each week. That's what BPD does. And in tracking that information, what they do is distribute that information to precincts, north, south, east, and west, to determine what is happening in a particular hot area and or to get enough information of an issue that's escalated. In Mr. Coleman's situation, that wasn't the case. In the 2 children that have shot, that wasn't the case as it relates to shot spotter and being consistent in that area. Also want to talk about Niven. In each of these cases, we partner with the ATF, and that's very, very important, because what the Niven program does is allow us to fingerprint, it's a fingerprint system when we collect shell casings from these 3 instances I just named. But they help investigators connect shooting crimes and those responsible. But that's a process and it takes a while. We also have E-Trace for guns, illegal guns particularly, to determine the origin of where these guns come from in the commission of these crimes. And then 2 years ago, we created a violent crimes task force, partnership with all of our federal partners, to help us assist particularly with the gang violence in Birmingham and those reductions. At some point, Rick Journey is going to pass out a list of you to all the other things we've done as it relates to the HEAT program, the Hospital Link Violence Program, the Justice and Governance Partnership Program, the mental health program we do with Birmingham City Schools, the Restore programs, the Safe Haven programs we have with Park and Rec, as well as the Surge Project and the Reentry Alliance we just named probably about a week and a half ago with y'all. I can rattle off every program. I can rattle off every partnership and all the strategies BPD has. But it turns out we still need the community to do their part. So again, I stand before you to request that if you know or have information on shooter or shooters, particularly as it relates to our most vulnerable, in this case, over the 72-hour window, 11-year-old Mason, 9-year-old London, and Mr. Coleman, who was 62 years of age, who is now deceased. Come forward and share that information. There's a number you can call, 205-254-7777. We are here to help. If you need safe haven, if you need relocation, if you are in fear, whatever it is, we will assist you. But we do need the village to participate in making sure we do everything we can to protect our most vulnerable in the community. With that said, I want to open it up for any questions you may have.
Yeah, you mentioned that at least one of the people that were with Michael Coleman yesterday may have shot back. Is that person just not talking to police at all?
As I've stated, and I want to be sure I'm measured in what I'm saying, this is an active investigation. And what I can tell you is that several people, not one, several people are refusing to cooperate with Birmingham Police Department and actually give pertinent and factual information to assist in bringing those who shot and killed Mr. Coleman to justice.
I understand it's an active investigation. Can you at least confirm that the person that was in the car actually shot and killed him, or did fire from one of his?
No, I can confirm the shots from the vehicle.
Okay. You talked about ShotSpotter having it in hot areas. Is it every community in Birmingham or just those designated hot areas?
Well, again, due to our public safety concerns, I think we've been pretty consistent over the last few years. We don't share and or give out information where ShotSpotter is actually located. What I can tell you is that there are enough places in the community where if and when people don't assist us in calling 911 after shots have been fired, ShotSpotter is designed for its own activation for BPD to respond in real time if a call is delayed to 911 or a call doesn't come at all.
You talked about the most vulnerable kids, unfortunately, a person with ALS. You said yourself you can rattle off all these programs that you guys have, but do you think the approach between your office and DPD is actually tough on crime?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. You see us continue to talk about exhibition driving and you think it's an isolation of people just doing donuts in the middle of the street. I want to tell you it's more than that. For example, there have been 32 charges from this Operation Night Ride. But only 10 of them have actually been related to exhibition driving. There have been 9 felonies, which is well beyond exhibition driving. There have been 25 vehicles towed. Now let's talk about what's in the vehicles. And let's talk about the type of vehicles. None of those vehicles were stolen. 22 weapons seized, 21 being handguns, and 3 switches, which we know in Montgomery, it passed out of the House, but it didn't pass out of the Senate to hold people more accountable for actually using switches, as you know, it's the device on guns. 1 rifle, and then a host of drugs, from crack cocaine, heroin, pharmaceutical drugs, and a host of other illegal drugs that have come from this operation. And here's the spillover. We talk about being tough on crime, where people think we're focused just on one thing here, but over here you have where we have had the opportunity, crimes against persons, to decrease robbery in the city in 2024. We decrease felony assaults in 2024. But we've seen an increase in property crime as it relates to burglary and theft. And so what we know from theft standpoint, this operation allows us to get these cars and get this illegal stuff out of these cars. In addition to that, what we know from the forms of shootings, people are stealing cars or using stolen cars while they have these shooting activities. And so from an enforcement standpoint, it's important that we tackle things like this that have a higher yield and results on activities such as stolen cars that are used in commission of other crimes, such as discharging a firearm in occupied dwellings and occupied vehicles. In the case of this past 72 hours, again, finding out who is stealing these vehicles is extremely important. Is there a ring? Is there a special operation? In addition to that, I think this violent task force we've created has literally allowed us to bring felony indictments and take hardened criminals, shooters off the streets, as well as gangs off the streets, who have a reckless disregard for any other form of life, whether it's not just children and elders, but just all adults and all community members as a whole. So the answer is yes. With the layer of programmatic things we have and the enforcement efforts we have, particularly on operations that you know publicly of Operation Night Rider, but we don't publicly name all of our operations as it relates to the suppression of violent crime in our city. It works. Here's what those programs and operations can't predict. You fall out with your friend, y'all beef over something, one of y'all shoot at the other, you miss, your friend shoots back at you. We come to you and say, hey, we know there's been a shooting, we need your cooperation. You know it's your friend, you won't tell us. What you do is take matters in your own hand and you decide to retaliate. And that goes back and forth, but we don't know when and we don't know where, because it's usually on site when y'all see each other. That's not a Birmingham thing, that's pretty much a American issue right now of retaliation. But in exchange, what we try to do for that, to overcome that form of violence, is we've partnered with City Councilor LaTanya Tate, who's over the Public Safety Committee, and I do want to publicly not only acknowledge her, but thank her for her efforts related to violence disruption and the programmatic things we're doing from a re-entry as well as a prevention standpoint that includes violence disruptors in community to actually de-escalate situations to keep two people who know each other from shooting each other. Because literally 9 out of 10 of these shootings is very personal in nature. So from a policing standpoint, how do you predict and or anticipate and or control that? So those community disruptors allows us to assist the police in de-escalating those situations.
Follow up to that, do you think BPD should be tougher on crime? Or do you think this is tough enough?
No. What I believe is that BPD as a department is very tough on crime, particularly crimes, violent crime. And I think stats show, as it relates to crimes against persons, on par, May of 2024 versus May of 2023. Violent crimes such as robbery, violent crimes such as felony assault, there's been a decrease. On par with homicides and related to property crimes, there's a continued effort to make sure we can find those who are committing burglary and theft, who are in a position to steal more guns, taking them off the street.
You talked about the stolen cars. Was the car involved in yesterday's incident stolen?
That is an active investigation. I'll leave that to BPD to answer that question.
How frustrating is it that you've got a packet of really 2 pages full of programs and everything, and we still find ourselves dealing with situations like this?
It's extremely frustrating. So here's the deal. I think it's important to always humanize our victims. They're our community members. I got 2 children, one 11 and one 9. They have a family, they have classmates, they live in community. I have a 62-year-old man who literally bothers nobody, just chilling under his favorite place, under a tree, knowing that hospice was just given to him, right? But instead of going into some facility, he chose to be in his happy place. So let me explain the frustration, because it's not just about me, right? When you look into Mr. Coleman's significant other's eyes and see the pain, see her hurt, when you look into his brother's eyes, they're 2 years apart, I told you. It's triggered because I lost my own brother to gun violence, so I get how he feels. When you hear London's mother crying, because it's not just about London, but what London's 8-year-old sibling and 1-year-old sibling is experiencing and how they're reacting. Or when you talk to Mason's grandmother, Miss Colvin, who has every right in the world to be upset and pissed and mad and angry. It's not how I feel, it's how the victims' families feel and their communities feel. And there's a repeat theme that I am seeing. These family members are saying, my family member, we weren't doing anything. Why won't people step up and give information? And then literally without fail, as soon as it happens to somebody else's family, they say, why weren't people stepping up to give information? I want to make it very, very clear. Because this question, he was going to drive this line about BPD and enforcement and are they doing enough? BPD can take shooters and killers off the street more if community members who have information actually come forward and give us that information. I've never seen a detective be able to solve a case without a witness coming forward or without some form of evidence. It doesn't happen. So yes, it's frustrating, but for multiple reasons. For the victim, for the victim's family and their community, as well as actually knowing that people have information and they refuse to share it with us to actually go get the shooter or killer off the street.
Do you think the community really grasps this cycle of retaliation and, like you said, it could be their loved one tomorrow? Do you think they really understand the need to come forward?
I do. I think the community knows, and that is why we do extra things. Look, we're working to build out our intelligence infrastructure. Knowing that in one hand, we have to get very creative and innovative in how we collect information that people don't want to come forward. That's one. 2, as you know, yesterday the city council voted to receive $4+ million from the federal government to enhance additional resources for our real-time crime center, more cameras, as well as the Public Safety Committee yesterday being approved for, separate from that, more additional cameras. Cameras aren't enough, y'all. Cameras allows you to engage and interact if a crime occurs, right? But the best way to decrease crime, the best way to prevent crime is to actually take shooters and killers off the street. And to your question, here's what we know. In this city, unfortunately, people give safe harbor to shooters and killers. They know them, they won't tell us. And then I want to talk to the people who fear or in fear. I think that's a certain segment. And I'm not going to downplay that. For those who are in fear, let us know. We're not the federal government, but trust me, there are local resources that we can get very creative with to assist a person wanting to come forward but also concerned for their safety, making sure we do everything we can to protect them, all the way up into the process of them actually testifying before a jury, because that's what needs to happen, to actually hold a person accountable and find them guilty. That is the last step. But the first step is actually the witness or someone with information coming forward for the police to have an actual, the best effort of an actual investigation.
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in really quick, just a time check for you, because I know you got other things. We've been going about 35 minutes.
We can keep going.
Okay.
It's on everybody's
Sorry,
mind.
yeah, just wanted to time check.
Rika cut me off in a minute.
There
Yes, ma'am.
there was an indication back in 2023 that a new comprehensive crime plan would be put in place in 2024. What was that plan and what was the outcome of trying to put that in place?
You will see, we've been rolling out different parts of that plan, but you will see it in its totality probably within the next 90 days. So for example, let's talk about the policing end of it. Yesterday, the city council voted on two things. They voted on a reserve officer, and they voted on a citizen form of, observation. I want to talk about the reserve first. We have our beat officers here in the city of Birmingham. And because of an increase in 911 calls, and people call 911 for everything, so I want to be clear about saying that. There's less time for them to actually drive on their beat because they're always on a call, right? You say, well, where's the police presence? Why aren't the police driving around? Why is the police response this amount? Well, there's probably a 99.999% chance that the actual officer on that beat is on a call. Or we have situations where we're fortunate to have so many events in our city. Beat officers are pulled to support events. Well, in order to decrease that, we want to make sure post officers that are certified can support events to make sure we max out having patrol officers in our streets for presence. That is separate from the actual special operations we have in town. And then we talk about the citizen piece. It was not part of the public conversation yesterday. This is more isolated to certain things we do, such as exhibition driving. So I want to give you an example. This is not a situation where people are riding around in cars. This is not a Bernie Fife situation, right? There's a street racing event. We know it because a flyer goes out, people meet up. Well, the citizen in plain clothes can be out there just like everybody else with their cell phone, because that's what they do. They record the event. And in real time, if camera's not in that intersection, or Night Rider operations on a different side of town, then this person can simply, in plain clothes, blending in with everybody else with their cell phone, just text that email in real time to BPD, because all they're doing is observing. They're not doing anything else. We then talk about the task forces and the special operations, and they're designed to address and suppress certain crimes in the city. So again, you see this decrease in crimes against persons. We're now focused on how do we address crimes against property, particularly around burglary and thefts. That we saw a decrease pretty much between 18 and 23, but we've seen a spike in 24. And so focusing on making sure we address those things. And then we're working with the actual federal government as well through our grant processes to levy more additional resources for more manpower, as well as our local community partners, including UAB, a partnership around not necessarily NIVEN, but a more enhanced version of it, of how do we have a program designed to assess shell casings and others to make sure we can find out any correlation from the same guns, if there's any correlation of the same guns being used in some of these crimes, to make those connections. That if we get a person arrested here, to see if they're attached to or tied to any other shootings in our city, which we believe there's only a small percentage of people committing some of these most heinous crimes in our city. And then we'll be in a position to follow up with additional information. But it has been a slow reveal over 2024, the various things we're doing, including Operation Night Ride.
Can you go a little bit more in detail about witness relocation? Is there efforts to make that happen? Is it already going on, or is it still more in the idea phase? Can you highlight it?
No, I will highlight by simply saying that it has already been done in the past. So I do want to look the public. I do want to restate for the public. If you have information that is pertinent to an actual investigation of a shooting and or a homicide or felony assault or someone that survived, especially for a child or a senior, but you're in fear of your own life or fear of retaliation or fear of where you live, 205-254-7777. Let us know. And I commit to you there are resources to help you not only feel safe, but at a minimum equally be safe. And if that requires relocation, if that requires safe harboring, if that requires resources, whatever that looks like, we're not only ready but willing to provide.
When it comes to the relocation, do you guys just help them for so many months, or do you guys truly help people pick up their lives and move it somewhere else and start? How does that work?
So again, we're sensitive to how much information we divulge to make sure for the safety of that witness. But let's just say we do everything necessary to keep the witness safe, as well as open to getting to the finish line of actually testifying before a jury related to what they've seen in one of these heinous shootings that involves any victim, but particularly a child or a senior in our community.
Another action by the city is actually, taking action against these businesses that are maybe harboring this crime. If you're not able to directly hold these businesses accountable, what might be next?
So I'm actually pleased with the drug nuisance abatement team. You've heard the term DNAT multiple times. DNAT has this way of making sure that we're not only going on the criminal line, but the civil as well. The civil actions we can take to hold people accountable, i.e. small business owners, landlords, the tenant, etc. And so it's not just isolated to a small business, but it's also in regards to an apartment complex or a house that is either owner or renter occupied. And we know there's consistent drug sales or drug use and or drive-ups and shootings and or any other thing that's on private property that creates a public nuisance. The drug nuisance abatement team has this tool where they go before a civil judge to either shut, the judge is then given the opportunity to say business owner and or tenant and or landowner, please come into compliance. These are the things you have to do. And if they fail and or violate, a judge can then hold them more accountable, a fine and or the closure of that apartment complex, forfeiture of that home, and or the closing of that business due to their private property becoming a public nuisance. That is a process. In the past, I do want to give some stats. Just in the last few years, the drug nuisance abatement team has had 129 properties receive demand for corrective action. So So they're doing an amazing job of actually holding private business, private ownership accountable, and getting in front of a civil judge to make sure they're in compliance, and if not, more corrective action up to closing that business or that house or apartment.
Back to the Coleman case, have police released the technical evidence report?
You have to speak with the Birmingham Police Department about that. I won't necessarily get into any more information on the investigation related to the 3 shootings, but for what I've publicly shared a minute ago. Anybody else?
I have one more on the topic of the Citizens Observer Patrol. A lot of people, as you mentioned, are already fearful to come forward. Maybe what is your message to these people who you are trying to get to be a part of this initiative?
This is a very niche initiative. The number's up to, you won't see anytime soon 200 citizens actively being out there. That's not what this is about. 1, we have to create the program. 2, they have to be trained by BPD. 3, we have to find something that we think we've already found to place citizens in to simply observe and share information with police in real time. We believe in the places we're thinking about. It's not crimes against persons per se, and it's not a situation where they would be in harm's way. And so my encouragement is very simple. I am unaware of any city in America where the police and or the mayor's office can do everything on their own. And again, Rick Journey is sharing with all of you all in detail all the programmatic things we're doing, all the things we're doing from a enforcement standpoint, all the things we're doing from a re-entry prevention standpoint. How much tax dollars and funding and resources and partnership goes towards all these things. It's not enough if the community does not step up, take co-ownership and do their part. The last thing I'll say, and this is what I'll close on, is that my heart and thoughts are with these victims, but especially our children, our seniors. And I need the public to help us take shooters and killers off the street who harm our most vulnerable community members, which are our children and our seniors. And that is my direct plea to the public, that we need your assistance. And if you need safe harbor or help in sharing that information, let us know so we can give it to you. And thank you for your time today.